Joining us now, Job Creators Network, Carlos Ruiz. Carlos, great to have you with us, man.
Hi, thank you, John. Hey, thank you for having somebody from the Wild West on your show.
I know, in Arizona, Carlos, you're on the front lines, right? Arizona's like becoming now the swing state. All the Democrats telling me they're going to win Arizona in 2020. They're telling me that the state has just swung blue. You just had an upset out there over the weekend. Kelly Ward taking over as Republican chairman of Arizona. Shocker, Ward getting beat 2 times for U.S. Senate. She's a former state senator. How will that change things, Carlos?
I am involved in Republican politics, and there's a bit of a, I was just talking to my wife this morning. There's a bit of a schism between what I would call the donor class of the Republican and the grassroots of the Republican, we really need to kind of come together to make sure that the Republican Party is representing the principles of low taxation, free enterprise, but hearing what the grassroots what their concerns are.
So, were you surprised by Kelly Ward's upset win?
When I went up there I was at the statutory meeting, and it was a bit of a shocker. I mean, it was a 50. I don't know. I think she won by 52% of the vote of the state committeemen, and so it seemed that seemed about right. It wasn't a landslide, but I think that's probably where our state party is right now, as far as the state committeemen. I think that was probably representative. Yeah.
Well, look. Losing the McSally race, even though she's now a senator when John Kyle stepped down, Carlos Ruiz losing the McSally race there, especially when election night, we all thought we were putting Arizona in the win column, right?
Yeah.
Even though it wasn't called by any of the networks. I mean, my people were telling me, we got a comfortable lead there. McSally's going to win next state to look at. And so we were supposed to, look, we went to bed election night thinking we gained 4 seats in the Senate. We got up the next day, we lost Montana with votes that came in boxes. And then the day after that, we fall behind in Arizona, and it gets worse every day until finally McSally concedes. And it's like, where do these voters come from?
Yeah, right? I don't know.
Crazy. All right, I want to get to the president's tax cut plan, Carlos Ruiz with Job Creators Network. Thanks for being with us. I call it the big lie. This is the lie from the left, who have been telling us forever, for 18 months, that the Trump tax cuts are not going to work, that they're not for the middle class, that they're all for big corporations and the wealthy. And now people are starting to see the benefit of it. I'm getting texts every day from people who are saving money. It's also fueling the economy. When does the legacy media start to acknowledge the fact that this Trump tax cut has been the one thing that has driven the economy to the success where it is now, Carlos?
I can tell you what has happened for my business, which I have a business that custom cuts raw material for manufacturing and fabricators. So once the election occurred, and in 2017. We all of a sudden saw an increase in business over 2016, and so 17 was a good year. And then in 17, at the end of 17, when they passed the tax cuts, 18 just took off. There was the president's election built confidence in business, small business, and big business that drove demand for goods, but that tax cut, once that tax cut, it just took off. In 18, we were up 25% in sales last year, and knowing that I had a tax cut and I was making profit, I bought a second abrasive water jet machine. I increased pay for my employees. I brought one gentleman that was a part-time employee onto full-time. So there's all these benefits, improved benefits for my employees. So all of these things were because of these tax cuts, and I think without them, I mean, we were just bouncing along for 8 years before then, and so I think it's indisputable that the economy has been doing better 2 years since the election of Trump, and even better since these tax cuts. It's indisputable.
So in your own business, right, it's created jobs, right? In your own business, it's allowed you to put somebody from part-time to full-time. In your own business, it's allowed you to make additional investments. Going forward, though, some people say, okay, well, that's already done. Or you hired the one person in 2018, you bought your equipment. What about going forward, Carlos Ruiz? What impact does it have on your company and others going forward into 2019, 2020?
Well, it gives me some stability, and also, we're still seeing demand from all different sectors, and so it just gives the knowing a nice stable tax system. I know, okay, if I grow more, I can buy more equipment and know how it's going to be expensed, if I can expense it right away. So it just gives me some stability, knowing what's going to happen several years. Now, the only problem is that this tax cut. My business is a pass-through. It's an S corporation, so that was not something that was made permanent. That was something that was advocated by the Job Creators Network, and that was put into the bill. But what we need to do is we need to make that portion of the tax cuts that needs to be made permanent, because that will expire. I think in 2024 or 25, right. And so that would not be a good thing for all of a sudden a rollback into the old days where your equipment's depreciated at different schedules, and it just would make things more complicated.
Now, listen, Carlos Ruiz, you got the thing nailed. This has got to be permanent, because it's permanency that drives long-term behavior, right? Because if you think of something as short-term, right, it's just a one-shot deal. You're not going to make longer-term decisions. You're on the John Fredericks Radio Network, trucking the truth across America. We're with business owner and longtime tax cut and economic prosperity advocate Carlos Ruiz. He's live in Arizona, and he runs a small business been impacted by the tax cuts. Carlos, there's a movement underfoot right now to raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour. Minimum wage is $7.25. There's a lot of us that believe minimum wage does merit an increase, maybe $10. I think going from $7.25 to $15 is a big jump. How will that affect, if that goes into play, how will that affect your business and other small business owners that you know in Arizona? Well,
this is one thing this is another thing that gets my blood boiling about proposals from the Democrats. In Arizona, a couple of years ago, we passed a proposition. We have an initiative process, and so the state of Arizona, they put on the ballot, and the people of Arizona voted a minimum wage increase above federal, and it went from the lowest. Started out at 10, and then it went to 10.50. This year it went to 11. Next year it's going to be 12. So we didn't see businesses go out of business the first year, but a few. Then when it went to 10.50, we saw some other, mostly restaurants, and they were marginal restaurants, or they didn't, but there was still some business closures. It went to 11 in January, and just in the newspaper there was this a business that was a restaurant and brewery, microbrewery, and they had 26 employees, and they decided as of January they weren't going to serve food anymore. They were going to focus on their brewing business. So there's 26 people that were working that are now out of business, just because that particular business went from 1050 to 11. And so there's little pockets of like that, those kinds of decisions that are being made here in Arizona, and for it to then say, we're going to say, no, we're going to go from $12 an hour to $15 an hour. That's any kind of national policy on wages. It doesn't work nationally. There's Arizona is not a $15 an hour minimum wage state.
Right.
Maybe it works in New York City. Maybe it works in California. It doesn't work nationwide, and that's my biggest problem is raising that kind of minimum wage nationally, because we have experience here in Arizona with problems, especially at the young age. We entry level. My business, we pay much higher than minimum wage because we have sophisticated equipment, so we need a higher level of experience for someone. But there was a young lady that wrote an op-ed a few weeks back saying that she couldn't get a job. She was a high school kid looking for a job. She couldn't find a job, and she made the observation that all of the workers in the places that she was going were much older than her. Mm-hmm. And that's because if you're going to have to pay $11 an hour, $12 an hour, you want somebody that has experience that is going to show up. So it hurts young employees. It hurts those first-time employees that are trying to build their skills.
Well, that's it. You lock out younger people trying to get the experience in the job market when you start getting up to $15. I mean, I think there's a balance there, but it's certainly not 15. You're on the John Fredericks Radio Network. We're with Carlos Ruiz. Carlos, he's an entrepreneur. He's also an experienced raw material supply chain executive. He's the business owner of a company called HT Metals out of Tucson, Arizona. He's on the West Coast right now chatting with us. For more information on Job Creators Network, you want to go to taxcutswork.com. If you want to know what your savings is right now and you haven't gotten to your account and you're kind of waiting on it, just go to taxcutswork.com, taxcutswork.com, plug your information there. It's going to spit it out. You're going to be shocked at the amount of money you're going to save. And I tell you what, if you're a small business owner, Trump's tax cuts, the best thing that ever happened to your business and its ability to grow. Carlos, some of your employees that have been positively affected by what you've been able to do for them because of the tax cut, what have some of their reactions been? Back to you.
Well, they see it in their paychecks. They see it in the bonus that they were provided at the end of the year. They see it in the fact that the business is much more stable. So they've been very positive. And, another thing that's great about Job Creators Network, they provide information to business owners that allow you to speak to your employees about policies that affect the business and affect them as employees. And so I would encourage people, small businesses listening, just go on to Job Creators Net, just Google Job Creators Network and see. So that way I do speak to my employees. I don't tell them how to vote, but I do. It's interesting. I have one gentleman that works for me. He's close to 60. He really hadn't voted. I don't think he'd voted previously ever. In 2016, just talking to him about the effects of policies. He registered to vote. He voted for the first time. He got his spouse to vote, and so that's kind of the impact that I think business owners can have is just to explain to employees how tax policy affects a business, how something like a minimum wage change can affect their business, how even things like immigration affect a business. So it's an important thing for business owners to do, I think.
And I tell you what, Carlos Ruiz, I think your analysis here is spot on the minimum wage because it's coming from somebody that isn't affected by it. It's easy for an employer to get on who's paying a bunch of people $7.25 and say, oh, no, I don't want to raise it. It's going to cost me money. It's going to hurt us. I mean, you're in a business that you don't pay anybody $7.25 an hour because they work with sophisticated equipment. So in reality, it has no personal impact on you or your company whatsoever. But what it does have on is, like you said, younger people trying to enter the job market, other people coming back. And look, I think all of us realize $7.25 is probably outdated. I think it could move to $10 and not be devastating to the economy. But when you start stepping this up to $12, $13, $14, $15, I mean, you just simply price people out of jobs that are starting out. And the government shouldn't be mandating that. Is there a minimum wage number that you think works, Carlos?
Well, I say there shouldn't be. I'm probably there shouldn't be a minimum wage. I think local demand for labor will establish what the minimum is. If 7 something is probably too low, but I know that I think there was something I had read that very few out of the millions and millions of people actually working, there's only a couple 100,000 or even less that are actually working full time at minimum wage. Mm-hmm. And I don't know where they are, but in Arizona, I don't think that $7.25. No one was even paying that, right. Even in a lower wage state. The labor market will dictate where the minimum wage will be. So I think that's kind of maybe 10 if you had to set something. But I don't, like I said, philosophically, I don't like saying that somebody in Montana or somebody in New Mexico or Idaho, this is what you have to pay, right. Because the local economy may not require that.
Yeah, like I just say, it's going to be different working in downtown Manhattan, New York City, than it is in Billings, Montana. No question about it. Also, though, the tight job market now, there's more jobs. This president and his policies have created more jobs and people wanting to fill them. What that means is wages naturally go up because you have to pay people more because they have other options. And so it manages it. It manages itself. But look, we're never going to do away with the minimum wage. So my objective now is to get a number that is not going to A, hurt the economy, and B, hurt people entering the job market. And I think probably $10 is probably there.
You're probably right.
Yeah. And so it's the right thing to do. But Carlos, you nailed it. We've got to make these tax cuts and small business tax cuts permanent. Pass-through's got to be permanent. 100% deduct's got to be permanent. All the good things that have happened. The other thing is there's lower marginal rates. People are forgetting about that. It's all this stuff has been buried with the fake news legacy media. It's all going to come out. And for more information, go to taxcutswork.com. That's taxcutswork.com. I want to thank Carlos Ruiz for being with us, and small business owner, job creator, his company HT Metals in Tucson, Arizona. Hey, Carlos, great segment. Thank you so much, man.
Yeah, thank you, John.
Thank you. Excellent.
Bye-bye.